The manhwa begins in a grand manner at night. The candle lights flicker through the room while she lays on her back, her breath warm as she exhales. She lays with a bewildered expression while her heart races continuously, each beat harder than the last. Then a hand gently lifts her chin as he addresses her carefully, "My dear." He finishes his statement, his gaze sharp and tempting as he speaks, "I heard you were desperately looking for me." She shifts her gaze to the side, muttering a hesitant response. She wouldn't exactly call it desperation, but... Sensing her hesitation, he leans forward with a faint smile, asking what it is she wants to say, and she admits she's just thought of something they should add to their marriage contract. Confused, he asks if they didn't already review it together, stating he believes it guarantees she will be well compensated, but she just tells him it isn't that. She covers her mouth with her hand, embarrassed, as she points out that the contract says nothing about an heir. She starts to add that if she were to conceive a child with him, but he cuts her off, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips as he echoes, "A child?" He doesn't stop there. Leaning over her, he asks, "Are you saying that during the 3-year contract period, I might impregnate you?" For the first time, she meets his gaze, answering with quiet certainty that yes, it could very well happen now that they're married. She begins to bring up the contract again, but his sharp laughter slices through her words, and when he speaks this time, his tone is colder than before. He tells her she had been acting like an innocent virgin until just moments ago, but now he's guessing that's exactly what one should expect from a back-alley courtesan. She tries to explain that isn't how she meant it, but he simply says fine as he leans closer. His hand tightens around her waist, and he agrees they'll add a clause to the contract. Then his lips press against hers, his body leaning forward until his weight pins her in place. His tongue slides into her mouth, drawing her in with a deep, consuming kiss, while she pushes weakly at his chest, her hand trembling as she struggles to catch her breath. Finally, he pulls away, a thin strand of spit still linking their lips as his gaze locks on hers. But first, he murmurs, "I think we should find out if we can even conceive a child together." Moments earlier, a young girl rushes to the door, eager to welcome her sister. She throws her arms around her in a warm hug, and her sister greets her with a smile, asking if she took good care of the house while she was away. With certainty, the young girl reports that of course she did, it's her job. She reports that their father is resting after returning from a meeting, and their mother is asleep. On the surface, she seems cheerful, but a question lingers in her mind. Who did her father meet with? It's strange, because she thought he didn't have to meet anyone at all. House Ambrosia was a comical house that made a living out of selling mountain rock salt. That white powder was once too expensive for commoners to buy due to its limited production, but its price plummeted once roads were built across the empire and markets started to thrive. That also allowed sea salt to be sold at a much lower price and in much higher quantities compared to their salt. She suggests she prepared dinner and the little girl chimes in offering to help. Although their family name may still be on the noble directory, they lost all their associates because they didn't want to be with people who had nothing. As she slides the carrot, a thought still lingers on her mind. She wonders who her father met that day to be tired. She slices the carrot again, and the moment the machete touches the board, she pauses. Under her breath, she murmurs, almost to herself, "I'm tired too." At that moment, her brother rushes in. Caught off guard, she turns to him and asks where he has been, but he brushes off her concern and instead urges her to look at the newsletter in his hand, reporting that the imperial family's summer villa has caught fire and 2 princes have died. The news stuns her, and when she gathers herself, she asks if all 3 princes were killed, but he clarifies that only the 2 who were in the villa perished. Her grip on her dress tightens as she drifts into thought, immediately considering what change the news would bring. Now all the stores will close to observe a period of mourning. Just then, her sister appears again, snapping her out of her thoughts, this time holding a cabbage. With a reassuring smile, she simply remarks that it means she should head to the market tomorrow, keeping to herself the fact that their mother's cough had worsened and she had spent all the money she had to call a doctor. She urges her siblings to go wash their hands, but her brother, as if he has seen right through her worries, calls out to her in an unsteady voice. His earlier questions still echo in her mind, whether he should find a job as a shoeshiner, what they would eat tomorrow, and where he would even start looking. Fidgeting, he then announces that there is good news as well. He tells her that Duke Rochester is coming to the capital. She immediately turns, her expression lifting slightly as she asks who is coming. This time, without hesitation, he answers, her first crush, Duke Colleen Rochester. On the other hand, the Duke's assistant remarks that he can hardly believe the prince's deaths have already been recorded in the newspaper. He checks on the Duke, asking if he is all right, since they were his cousins after all, but the Duke remains silent. Then, without warning, he crumples the newsletter in his hand and asks that they speak about something less exhausting. But his assistant simply carries on, teasing that once they reach the capital, he will be swarmed by people saying the same thing, and yet he already seems tired of it. Then, with a sudden shift, the assistant adds that he should also verify another rumor. The one about the famous Stella Ambrose. That little girl, the Duke thinks with faint disappointment, has apparently grown into the most vulgar woman in high society. What a shame! His assistant then adds, almost with a sly glint, that he's heard she is even being considered as one of the Duke's potential marriage candidates. The Duke repeats the word marriage? Slowly, as if tasting something bitter on his tongue. Then, in a sudden shift, his cold voice cuts sharply through the air, each word dripping with disdain. Why would I ever marry such a filthy woman? In a new scene, a man who happens to be the Emperor, Dirklan Red Eric, urges Colleen to get married. He continues explaining that since the death of the two princes elevated him to the second in line to the throne, it's only natural. Colleen, expressionless, simply remarks that he speaks as though he's already on who his wife will be, his thoughts concentrated on how the Emperor, who also happens to be his maternal uncle, is an incredible ruler, who can't wait to have him killed. The Emperor responds immediately with a gentle expression on his face as he admits it's true, disclosing that he'd put in a great deal of time and energy into choosing one for him. The Duke, unable to vent his fury, grits his teeth in simmering annoyance as a series of questions linger in his mind. After all that time and effort, he'd chosen Stella Ambrose, the whore of high society? Why couldn't the man just admit the truth? That his rank in the line of succession was a threat, and he simply couldn't bear to hand any power to his own nephew. Colleen rises with such composed grace that no one would guess he'd been irritated only moments ago. He informs the Emperor that he has business to attend to and politely asks to be excused. The Emperor, lifting his teacup just a bit from the saucer, almost as if a thought has just occurred to him. By the way, Colleen, I hear this young lady has been in love with you for a very long time. Do be kind to her when you see her. On the other hand, Stella rushes towards the door, but just as she's about to go out, her father appears suddenly, asking where she's going. She turns back to him almost immediately, then with a cheerful look on her face she shares her plan to sell flowers to be offered at the funeral since all the stores are closed in observance of the mourning period, but her father sharply cuts her off. He looks at her, his expression unreadable, as he asks how it'll appear to the public if a noble lady were to be selling flowers on the street. His word startles her and she staggers backward, thinking of how it's that word again, but being a noble doesn't put food on the table. Why does he get that? This time, she answers her father with daring defiance, telling him he should be grateful she can at least earn money that way, because otherwise she would have to start working in the back alley that very day. Her words seem to land exactly as she intended, startling him. He asks if she means as a courtesan, then declares he would rather go out on the street and beg than allow her to do that, but she cuts him off sharply. Clutching the basket in her hands, she explains that they ate their last cabbage the day before, so she has to work if they want to eat today. Her father's voice wavers as he calls her name, saying he didn't mean it like that. He apologizes for being such a bad father, but when she turns back to him, she tells him not to say that. Instead, she apologizes for being tired lately, promising she'll be back soon. He nods in acceptance, saying all right, but the moment she shuts the door behind her, his expression sinks again and outside the door she simply mutters under her breath, "Idiot." Standing there with the basket in her hands, she scolds herself for snapping at her father, insisting he had every right to be upset. Shaking the thought away, she presses forward, telling herself she'll make it up to him with a proper apology when she returns home. Later at night she walks with the basket that contains so many flowers just earlier that day already empty. Although it's so late at night, she's glad she was able to sell all of her flowers. She thinks about how little she'll have left after paying the flower shopkeeper, but at least it will be enough to keep them from going hungry through the mourning period. Suddenly, her foot taps against something. Looking down, she spots a flower and bends to pick it up, realizing it must have slipped from her earlier that day. Holding it in silence, her brother's words resurface in her mind. Her first crush, Duke Rochester, was coming to the capital. A flush creeps across her cheeks as she wonders how he even found out, since she's certain she'd never made it obvious. Then, a daring thought forms: what if she attended the funeral and paid tribute with this very flower? If she is lucky, she might catch a glimpse of the Duke from afar. She arrives home to an unusual quiet. It strikes her as odd that Mary hasn't come running to hug her, but she heads upstairs nonetheless. Pushing the door open, she wonders if Mary has simply fallen asleep, a bright expression forming on her face, only for it to fade instantly when she sees Mary lying still on the bed. She hurries to her side and, upon feeling her forehead, realizes she's burning up. Instinctively, she moves to go call a doctor, but Mary's hand weakly stops her. She tells her she can't. Stella asks if it's because she doesn't want to take medicine, but Mary shakes her head. That's not it. Then she says it plainly: they don't have money. Her heart throbs, and she bites her lower lip, feeling as though someone is punishing her. Otherwise, why must she watch her little sister worry about money? She sinks to the floor, leaning against the bed beside her, and gently explains that it's true they didn't have any before, but that day, the flower shopkeeper told her she could keep all the money she earned from selling flowers because he knew about their situation. Mary's face lights up with a bright smile, saying that's wonderful, and asks if it means she won't be going to work the next day. Stella asks why she would say that, and Mary replies that since she's sick, she would like her to stay with her all day. However, Stella declines, explaining that she wants to help the flower shopkeeper the next day as a way to repay his kindness. After putting her sister to sleep, she steps outside, her mind heavy with worry. She needs money for medicine, but how is she supposed to get it? Her fingers tighten around the fabric of her gown as a bitter thought takes root: misfortune never stops until it has piled up in layers upon layers. I'm sick of my wretched life. Stepping out of the house, she immediately comes face to face with her brother, Sanderson, standing in the yard. As she brushes past him, she asks if he can watch over Mary since she's unwell, but instead of answering, he asks where she's going at such an hour. Then he falls silent, caught in a daze, as his sister's voice cuts through the night, her hair whipping in the opposite direction under the push of the cold wind. She's going to make money. Sanderson demands to know where she's headed at that time of night, pleading with her not to go, but no matter how many times he calls out after her, she never once turns back. The dark back alley, the smell of canal pleasures, the steaminess in the air. Standing there frozen, she thinks of how none of what she's seeing currently is what she could have ever imagined. She even questions where all the determination she had just a moment ago when she left home has gone. She doesn't want to stay there any longer, she wants to go home, but recalling her feverish sister's words she can't help but question: but if I go home, what about Mary? She swallows up her pride and rushes into the distance, certain that being a courtesan couldn't possibly be the only type of job available there. She brushes past a person certain she could at least find menial chores to do if she begs enough, but a sudden voice brings her to a stop. She turns her head back and faintly calls, "Lily." She wishes the ground would open up and swallow her whole. It was humiliating enough to find herself in the back alley, a place reeking of canal pleasures, but now, to make matters worse, she has run into her former maid. Later that night, she returns home. Pushing the door open gently, she plans to slip in quietly, certain everyone must be asleep, but her eyes widen the moment she steps inside. Sanderson is seated at the dining table. He lifts his head, worry flashing in his eyes as he calls her name before hurrying toward her. She asks why he's still awake, but he doesn't answer. Instead, he throws his arms around her in a tight embrace while she teases lightly, asking what's wrong, pointing out that he never clings to her like this. She pats his head gently, as he sniffles, his voice breaking through the tears as he admits that when he saw her leave so late at night, he thought. She recalls her encounter with Lily and tells him while she was out for work, they ran into each other there and she told her how she was there to make money and Lily introduced her to some job. His voice shakes as he blurts out, Lily, their old housemaid? Was she going to be a maid now? Clenching his fists, he says no, if anyone should work it should be him as a footman. But she cuts him off, placing her warm hand over his. Crouching to his level, she tells him work is for adults and he's still a child. She'll figure it out, so he shouldn't worry. He bites his lip hard, his mind circling her words, so I'm too young to help Stella or to work, too young to stop her from going out late at night. He wishes he could be an adult already. She notices his frustration and asks if he's that upset that he's a child, calling him a silly goose, but his action the next moment leaves her stunned. He throws his arm around her neck, pulling her into an embrace as he makes a promise to grow up fast and work super hard so that she doesn't have to. The next day, she feels a quiet relief that Lily found her a job. Although she hadn't told Sanderson it was at a social club because she didn't want him to worry, she clings to Lily's reassurance that she would only be working in the kitchen, convincing herself it will be fine. Glancing up, she spots the flowers she'd accidentally dropped the other day. Picking them up, she mutters softly to them, as if they could hear her, telling them she knows they want to be put to good use. With a small smile, she adds that there's still some time before her shift starts, so they should go pay tribute to the princes. In a new scene, she arrives at the memorial site. Her gaze sweeps over the empty grounds, and she notes that since it's still so early, no one else has come. Stepping forward, she approaches the altar. Just as she is about to place the flowers down, a large figure appears behind her, though she remains unaware of his presence. The man pauses upon noticing someone already there. It is the Duke. With a nonchalant glance to the side, his eyes linger on Stella as she bows her head, offering a silent prayer in her heart. A flicker of irritation rises in his throat, and he lets out a frustrated sigh, thinking how he had assumed the place would be empty. Just then, Stella opens her eyes. Her hand flies to her mouth as a sharp gasp escapes her, her face already flushed the moment she recognizes Duke Rochester. Without a word, the Duke tosses the flower he brought onto the altar, then turns away sharply, leaving her to wonder if he is simply in a bad mood that day. She discreetly sniffs herself, wondering if she might smell of something unpleasant, but when she lifts her head, she thinks, I don't think so. So then, why did he look at me like I was some kind of vermin? On the other hand, the Duke lets out another irritated sigh, muttering to himself, so the rumor was actually true. Later, as he rides in his carriage, his assistant brings up yet another rumor, this time revealing that Lady Stella's uncle has been spreading word that her marriage to the Duke has already been confirmed. The Duke barely reacts, stating that he's long been used to all kinds of rumors about himself. However, his assistant goes on to declare that this particular one is rather vulgar, immediately catching the Duke's attention. He goes ahead to report the rumor. The rumor goes that Duke Rochester is a red-blooded man who survived years in the military, and yet even he wouldn't be able to resist Lady Stella if she took her clothes off and threw herself at him. Later, the Duke strolls through the social club, his thoughts lingering on the odd feeling he had when he first heard of the location. It might be called a social club, but to him, it is no different from a back-alley bar. The moment he pushes the door open, a voice rings out, announcing the star of the night, Egbert, declaring that the Duke has come to grace the stump with his presence. The Duke's gaze sweeps over the room, and he coolly remarks that had he known this was that kind of place, he would never have come. The man quickly hurries to the Duke's side, trying to ease the tension. He asks what the Duke would have him do, explaining that most places are closed due to the mourning period. He suggests they sit and talk, leading the way, and once the Duke takes his seat, the man wastes no time, saying he thinks it's about time he told him why he joined the military. The Duke, unbothered, simply responds dryly, asking what he thinks. He discloses that so many things bothered him there, so obviously he had to leave. Egbert pauses, then laughs, admitting that's true, recalling how the Duke had always carried an air of not desiring to be bothered, but now, he continues, it seems, despite all that, he's managed to land himself in quite the bothersome situation, bringing up his fiancée, Lady Stella Ambrose. He continues, his tone laced with heavy mockery, a faint smile curling at the corner of his lips as he remarks that she truly is the daughter of the year. In an effort to rebuild her fallen family, she is apparently roaming the streets at night with her cleavage on full display. The Duke's cheeks flush red as he silently curses in his mind, "Damn Ambrose." The man across from him lets out a sigh, scoffing that she's a snob who has turned down countless men, as if she had the luxury to be picky in her current situation. He adds that even Count Telebert's son was rejected. Leaning forward, his eyes glint with the kind of curiosity reserved for vulgar gossip, and he remarks that whenever he speaks to men who've fallen for her, they all sound so delirious. So just how pretty could she be? For the first time, the Duke answers, "Very pretty." Startled by the Duke's response, the man quickly asks if he's met her before. The Duke leans back in his chair, his voice calm, and replies simply saying, "Yes, she was irritatingly pretty as well." Suddenly, a voice cuts through the room. "See? I told you she's going to be the Duchess." The man with him turns and asks if he is indeed Lady Stella's uncle, and he confirms it. Beating his chest proudly, her uncle shares with certainty that from what he's heard the Duke is already smitten with her, even remarking that his niece has always had a quick hand. Pushing further, he says with certainty that once she makes a move on the Duke, he'll fall for her immediately, even joking that there might even be a pregnancy before the wedding. The Duke's who'd been silent all those while suddenly speaks, his face twisting in irritation as he dryly retorts, "So now I have a wife and child all of a sudden?" On the other hand, Stella works in the kitchen. It's been a while, but still she hasn't gotten over the look in the Duke's eye. The look of contempt he had, and can't help but question if perhaps she did something to annoy him. Just then, a man taps her shoulder, snapping her out of her thoughts. He asks if she can help in the lounge, explaining that the morning period has brought in a surge of customers and they are short-staffed. Panic flashes in her eyes, and her thoughts immediately spiral. Is he asking her to serve drinks? But she's even using a fake name right now to hide the fact that she's a noble. She finally speaks, though her words come with hesitation. She tells him she thought she was only going to be working in the kitchen, causing the man to snail. He tells her she can't just pick and choose the tasks she wants when they're that busy, asking if she isn't there because Lily put in a good word for her. You should at least do right by her and work even harder. She flinches at his words, realizing she hadn't considered that if she failed to do the job well, it would reflect poorly on Lily. Remembering how Lily had gone out of her way to help her, she knows she can't possibly cause her any trouble. Then with a new resolve, she gives him a firm nod, declaring that she'll do it. A few moments later, she moves carefully through the crowd with the drink in her hand, silently wondering if no one will recognize her. She prays to God for everything to go smoothly, yet just as she feared, perhaps her prayer came too late. She hears her name and freezes mid-step. An unsettling chill runs down her spine as she realizes the voice belongs to someone familiar, Duke Rochester. But it turns out to be nothing more than a scare. They are simply discussing, and she merely happens to be the subject of their conversation. One man casually asks the Duke if he would like her to be his fiancée, but before he can respond, the others jump in, claiming he doesn't even need to ask because she's the best he could possibly get. Another man remarks that he's heard she's good in bed, and yet another adds that she's an absolute beauty. Then the most vulgar of all, if you wanted you could even sell her around for a small fortune. She freezes in humiliation, silently questioning what on earth they're talking about. She left high society a long time ago, and now they're making crude, sexual jokes about her? The first man repeats his question to the Duke, asking what he thinks, if he also wants the whore of high society. However, the Duke's reply is dry and dismissive. Stella Ambrose, a woman like her is not worthy to stand beside me. Her hand trembles, and she quickly tries to leave, her mind unable to stop asking why. The only thing she ever did was quietly admire him from afar, meaning. Eyes fixed on the ground, she hurries away, so lost in her embarrassment that she doesn't notice the stranger in her path until she collides with him and crashes to the floor. Pain surges through her body, making her want to cry, but the thoughts in her head don't stop. Meaning, I never once dreamed of standing beside you, because I know better than anyone that I'm not worthy. While she sits on the floor with the pain that makes her want to cry, she hears it, a calm voice asking if she's okay, a gentle voice coming from over her head, that only makes her feel more miserable to be sprawled there, on the floor. The Duke, glancing down at her, simply mutters that she looks hurt. With an unsteady voice, she manages to tell him she's fine. The man behind him notices her state and comments on how he suddenly ran off, asking if he was the one responsible. Reaching into his pocket with calm composure, the Duke replies that he wasn't. Instead, it's quite the opposite. He simply pities and desires to help out. A gold coin glints in his hand before falling into the pile at her feet. As each coin lands, her tears begin to spill. She had tried to stay composed, but the weight of it all breaks her resolve. When the last coin drops, he remarks that it should be enough to cover the cost of the drinks and her medical expenses. Clutching one of the coins tightly in her hand, she tries to convince herself over and over that the situation isn't humiliating, that it's fine. At the same time, the man beside the Duke asks if he's finished so they can return to their conversation. The Duke gives her one final glance, then turns away, saying they had been discussing something rather important. The moment he walks off, more tears escape her eyes. It was humiliating, yet also an immense relief. This much gold could pay for a doctor for Mary and perhaps medicine for her mother as well. Forcing herself to move, she pulls herself up, silently repeating to herself that she's fine, even agreeing inwardly with the Duke's final words. Just then, the manager arrives, calling her name. Laura meets him with a hesitant smile, offering an apology, before asking afterwards if she can continue to work there. The Duke returns to the group of men, but his mind lingers on Stella. He recalls the false name she gave, Laura, and wonders if it might be her underground alias. A faint, silent scoff escapes him. What a cheap name, it suits her. He assumes she was trying to seduce him, just as her uncle had claimed. But then, what right did she have to make that expression? Damn Ambrose. The man pulling him from his thoughts casually mentions hearing that House Rochester plans to invest in the newly developed sea route. The Duke runs a hand through his hair before asking if he's interested in it. He admits it was meant to be a confidential project, though it seems word is already spreading. Still, he adds, he's seriously considering making an investment. His thoughts, however, tell a different story. A quiet scoff forms in his mind. Please, if I were truly considering it, why would I openly announce it to them? I'm surrounded by idiots on all sides. Later, Stella arrives home, tears streaming down her face as she considers how hard the job was to come by, yet she'd been dismissed just like that. She wonders if she should at least be grateful for the gold coins the Duke threw her way. But the moment his cold words echo in her mind, that a woman like her was not worthy to stand by his side, the pain cuts deeper and her tears spill faster. Humiliation burns in her chest, pushing the urge to run away in her head. But if she was to do that, then, what would become of her siblings? She shuts her eyes tightly, pushing the thoughts away, deciding it's best to go to bed so she can leave early the next morning in search of work. But then her gaze falls on the paper her brother had been looking at earlier. Picking it up, she notices an advertisement for a live-in governess. Housing and meals would be provided, a perfect situation for her. Even more perfect since being a noble might even work in her favor, and leaving the capital could help the strange rumor about her fade away. Still, as she walks upstairs, the rumors linger in her mind. I'm the whore of high society? I've never heard anything more absurd. The next morning, however, her father's reaction to the governess idea is far from supportive. He questions aloud what might happen if people start spreading rumors, especially since she would be a grown, unmarried woman living in someone else's home, while Stella counters with a firm stance, urging him to be a bit more realistic. They are broke, and they need money for her mother's medicine. Her father breaks into cold sweat upon hearing her words. He can't bring himself to say anything to counter it because deep in his heart, a part of him agrees with her. Still, he thinks being a live-in governess is not much different from being a maid, and as her father, he can't just stand by while she takes on such exhausting work. His mind races for an alternative until suddenly, an idea sparks. Straightening, one hand pressing against the table, he tells Stella to wait, assuring her that he will find another way. In a new scene, Stella's uncle is informed that her father will be visiting. A sharp laugh bursts from him as he declares he knew it all along. Stella is in no position to turn down a man like Rochester. His daughter steps forward with a satisfied smirk. She couldn't agree any better. Stella has always been that way, dim-witted. She adds that the girl doesn't even realize her value is slipping away with every passing minute. Her father cuts in with a sneer, saying she has no one to blame but her own father. Picking up the document, he mentions he's sure the old man has no idea that the contract he's coming there to sign is practically a bill of sale for his own daughter. On the other hand, Stella tends to her bedridden sister, gently dabbing her forehead with a wet cloth in hopes to reduce her fever. The door creaks open and her younger brother steps in, announcing their father's arrival. She grits her teeth as she walks, reflecting on how her father had suddenly left after saying he'd figure everything out himself and didn't come back for days, wondering just where he went while Mary was bedridden. She descends the stairs, still on the last step, demands to know where he's been, then she freezes when her gaze falls on her Uncle Vigil. Her anger fades in no time and she goes to them with a friendly reception, asking what had brought him there, and without wasting time he reveals her father had told him everything. Glancing at her, he asks if she's thinking of becoming a live-in governess, adding that it made her father sick with worry. Picking up a document, he continues saying that's why he's there. Then as he holds it towards her, he urges her to take it, saying the contract will solve all her problems. As she takes the paper, she asks what he's talking about, but it takes just a split second for that curiosity to turn into horror. She trembles as she reads the contents: a mansion in the capital, education fees paid in full, a live-in private doctor, as well as monthly pension. Her gaze hardens as she immediately glances up the paper, asking her father what that is. Immediately her father hurries to defend himself, claiming that was the only way to protect her. Tears well up in her eyes and she snaps, questioning how that was the only way to protect her, pointing out that she's practically listed there on the document as a collateral. Her uncle quickly interjects, saying it seems there's a misunderstanding, asking her to let him explain. He springs up and mentions how the two princes passed away recently, adding that the person responsible was hanged and his assets were seized, among which was their salt mountain. Her father springs up, joining his claim. He discloses that their salt mountain has been put up for auction so they could purchase it at a much lower price than usual, but Stella isn't having it at all. With tears streaming down her face, she finally speaks. With a voice like she's accepted her fate, she asks if he's saying he wants to buy a salt mountain when everyone has easy access to sea salt now, and is even willing to put her up as collateral for it. Her uncle comes to her in an attempt to comfort her, quickly clarifying that it seems there's been a misunderstanding. Patting her back gently, he tells her she knows her father would never do anything that could harm her. With an evident smirk playing on his face, he clears the misunderstanding, saying that is a chance for her to become the Duchess of House Rochester. That catching her attention, she glances up and her uncle continues. "You're marrying Duke Colleen Rochester." Quickly her imaginations take over. She pictures herself in a wedding dress and the Duke as the groom, and him repeating those words to her even on their wedding day: "You're not worthy to stand by my side." Trembling all over, she glances at her uncle and asks what he's talking about, saying the Duke would have to be crazy to marry someone like her. In a fit, her uncle snatches the contract away from her hand, saying that's not true. Then as he holds it firmly, he tells her with a near disturbing certainty that the Duke will marry her, because it is an imperial decree. On the other hand, the Duke curses aloud. Holding the imperial decree in his hand, he questions if his maternal uncle wants him to marry Stella Ambrose that badly. Tapping his desk, he thinks he's sure that Old Snake isn't pushing for that marriage just to mess with him, but he wants to simultaneously humiliate him and plant his own people in House Rochester. Tapping his desk, he considers how even if he were to refuse Stella Ambrose, he'd probably proceed to throw even more problematic women at him, and in that case, he finally yields. Marrying that damn Ambrose could be the best way to save him trouble. In a new scene, Stella approaches a man who appears to be a doctor, asking about Mary's condition. With a reassuring smile, he explains that Mary has nothing more than the common cold, though its long duration has clearly taken a toll on her body. He adds that she is also showing signs of malnourishment, but if she eats properly from now on, she will recover just fine. Keeping her expression neutral, Stella quietly repeats the words in her mind, common cold and malnourishment. Her fist clenches as the truth eats at her mind. Those were things that could have been easily treated with medicine and prevented with regular meals. Just then, her younger brother rushes into the room, proudly showing off the shirt their uncle bought for him. He asks how he looks, and she replies that he looks absolutely dashing. After the compliment, he informs her that their maternal uncle is waiting for her on the first floor. She steps to the side, and as she glances down through the window, she notices her uncle downstairs waving up at her. A soft smile touches her lips as she responds that she'll be there in no time. It has been less than a week since she signed the contract, yet their lives have already grown so much more comfortable, as though all the hardships they once endured had never existed. Her uncle urges her to hurry, hinting that someone important is here. When she asks if they're expecting a guest, he simply chides her for being silly, remarking that any man would want to visit his fiancée after she's moved into a new home. She swallows hard, her heart quickening and her cheeks warming as the thought sleeps in, was Duke Colleen Rochester really there? She recalls hearing that he was receptive to the idea of their marriage, and then before she knows it, she finds herself stuck in the thought. Perhaps he doesn't believe those ridiculous rumors about her after all. Perhaps he truly wants to see her in person. Once she gets to the ground floor, she finds countless gifts, stacked on each other, so much that they almost block the exit. Her uncle picks up a box and then urges her to look at it, hinting that the gifts are from the Duke. Her cheeks flush red the next minute as she thinks of how embarrassing it is. Now that she's seen this, she can't believe she ever entertained the thought that the Duke wouldn't show up himself. Her uncle calls her name, snapping her from her thoughts, and encourages her to open the rest, if surely she doesn't want to disappoint the Duke. She nods in agreement, a quick smile forming as she brushes off her worry, questioning silently why she's even complaining. He's merely being generous. She opens a box and finds a beautiful green dress inside, unable to stop herself from wondering aloud if the Duke truly prepared all of this. Before she can dwell on it, the messenger presents another gift, leaving her stunned. There's more. He hands her a basket filled with flowers, adding that a card is tucked inside. Her cheeks flush as she murmurs about how beautiful it is, her eyes bright with admiration. She picks up the card, its simple words reading, "I'm looking forward to it." Holding it, she thinks back to when her uncle said the Duke was open to marriage. She hadn't believed it. But as she pictures the Duke's face saying those same words, the thought slips in, maybe it's all right for her to look forward to it too. Her uncle, watching her closely, then turns to the boy standing nearby and asks why the Duke hasn't arrived yet, reminding him that he's still her fiancé. The boy explains the Duke didn't want to catch her off guard with a sudden visit, so he planned to come only after the gifts had been delivered. Her eyes snap open as she asks the boy again if that means the Duke is on his way presently. She freezes, trying to process her feelings. She's happy he's coming, yet the thought creeps in, what if he sees her and feels disappointed? Her blush deepens as a new thought comes to mind. After all, it's only polite to greet him in the dress he gave her. Later, her uncle compliments her, saying the dress suits her well and adding that he wishes her father were here to see it. She answers simply that it can't be helped since he'd gone to fetch medicine for their mother and wouldn't be back until late. Hesitantly, she says she hopes the Duke will like it, but her uncle scoffs, insisting any man with eyes would. Looking toward the distance, he remarks that he sees someone approaching and suggests she check, pointing out that it might be the Duke, but it's strange to Stella, she expected the Duke to come in a coach. Nevertheless, she walks forward to the figure. As she moves, the memories resurface. She recalls the day he tossed coins at her with pity, declaring she wasn't worthy of standing beside him. How he had laughed with his friends who called her the whore of high society. As she approaches, a proud smile settles on her face as she thinks, the Duke is a wise man, so he must have noticed something was off and done his own personal research and realized that the rumors were lies. She smiles faintly, calling out affectionately, "Your Grace." But the man waiting for her isn't the Duke. His cold gaze is unfamiliar, yet he happens to recognize her. Realizing he isn't the Duke, she pauses and calmly tries to ask who he is or if she knows him by chance. The man approaching her simply responds that she knows him, calling her stupid. In a flash he seizes her wrist while she recoils, asking him to let go, but he presses on, accusing her of happily accepting the jewelry and clothes he gave her, and yet, now she's pretending not to know him even after he broke off his engagement just for her. Looking at the utterly deranged man, the terror flashes in her eyes. She wonders if her uncle isn't seeing her, why he isn't helping her at all. The man grips her face, demanding she gives him an answer as to why she cut off contact. Perhaps was the money he was giving her not enough, or by chance, did you find yourself a new man? She insists he must have mistaken her for someone else, but that only fuels his anger more. He repeats her word, mistaken, his hand shaking from anger as he asks her if now she's telling him their love was a mistake. He raises his hand to strike her, calling her a filthy whore, but just before his hand reaches her face, another hand catches his midair. Stella flinches, bracing for the blow that never comes, and after a while she opens her eyes to find the Duke. The Duke in his usual tones simply asks what's going on there. The man scoffs, assuming this must be her new man. He asks to advise him, calling Stella a devilish wench. He continues, saying 1 minute she acts like an innocent virgin and the next minute she's whoring herself out. Stuck to the ground, she thinks she must tell the Duke she has no idea what the man is speaking of. She must clear her name at least for the Duke, but even she feels so sick to her stomach. The Duke glances at her briefly, then turns back to the man. Closing the distance between them, he thanks him for his worthless advice. He grabs his shirt, immediately continuing with his statement, "But that's too bad, I don't like people giving me advice." The man, already scared for his life, tries to brush it all off as some misunderstanding. Just as he searches for the words to say, Stella's uncle suddenly arrives, claiming not to know where the bum came from and assuring the Duke it's all a misunderstanding. He offers to take care of it, urging the Duke to check on Stella, who in his words seems quite perturbed. Taking her uncle's word for it, he walks over to Stella in no time. He glances down at her, who remains glued to the ground in fear. Then he speaks. "I came here today to talk to you, but you've just shown your fiancé quite an interesting scene, Stella." The Duke with his stiff expression speaks. He tells her he's surprised, it's even more than he thought, sending her straight into panic. She hurries to explain it's not like that. She tells him she has no idea who the man was, insisting there must have been some kind of misunderstanding. As she staggers up, she tells him she's just seeing the man for the first time ever that day. Then, snapping her eyes open with certainty, she questions why she would let something like that happen on such a special day, swearing that she knows nothing about it. The Duke insists on his claim any further, rather he stretches his hand towards her, following by a dramatic speech. "I was told that with this beautiful face, you have put countless men under your spell." Glancing down at her with an icy contempt look in his eyes, he simply orders her to cut off all those men before the wedding. Then, passing her side coldly, he adds that if she doesn't have the money for it, she should contact his aid. Seeing him leave so coldly, it dawns on her. She realizes the happy marriage she dreamed of wouldn't come true, and neither will she be escaping the prison she calls life. Rather, I will simply be moving from one hell to another. After that, she never ran into the Duke again, but the wedding arrangements proceeded really quickly. In a new scene, her brother confirms from their father if she really is in the bride's room, and her father says yes, adding that he shouldn't bother her too much, rather he should just see her briefly and leave. Moving swiftly, he agrees, saying all right, he'll just say hi and leave. Even at the wedding, people didn't hesitate to spread rumors. I hear she couldn't even afford a dowry, then she had the nerve to ask for an extravagant wedding. What a cheap and vulgar woman. I can't say I'm surprised though, since she slept her way up to that position. Her father scratches his head, swallowing the urge to confront them. It's his daughter's wedding after all, and no good would come of making a scene. Instead, he can only hope silently that the children don't hear any of it. Her brother finally slips into the bride's room, calling her name with a restless expression. Seated as the bride, dressed beautifully in her wedding dress, a pleasant expression on her face, she asks him what's wrong. Her brother doesn't waste time. Although his voice is unsteady, he manages to get the message across. Stella, are you happy? He continues telling her he'd heard people talking, and they all agreed on the same thing, that she's too good for the Duke. He retorts that she's the most beautiful woman in the world, so they were saying he doesn't deserve her at all. He fidgets, hesitating before blurting out, listen. Grabbing her hand, tears spilling freely now, he forces a smile, run. He continues assuring her he'll take care of the aftermath one way or the other. He tells her he's aware they made her life difficult, however she cuts him off. Anatomy, a soft smile on her face as she calls his name, Sanderson. She gently caresses his face while he repeatedly asks her to just leave everything behind and run, saying he doesn't want her to be miserable anymore. She flashes a warm smile, assuring him once more that she's okay, so there's no need for him to worry. Moments later, she walks down the aisle, arms locked with her father's. The worst wedding, that no one here truly wants, has begun. It wasn't until her hand rested lightly on his that the weight of the entire situation truly sank in. The officiant moves them along, asking both couples if they intended to uphold their duties to each other. Their voices overlapped in firm agreement, answering that they would. Without delay, it was time to seal the vow. The Duke's hand rose, lifting her veil with profound gentleness. Then, instead of leaning in immediately, he placed a gloved finger against her lips, tilting her chin ever so slightly before suddenly closing the distance in an unannounced kiss. The guests erupted in cheers. Her parents' eyes glistened with emotion, while her uncle's face remained unreadable, but there was one more person. Look at the Madame Rochester's face. It's understandable. I wouldn't want a woman like that for a daughter-in-law either. The scene changes swiftly to the couples. The Duke with an icy tone asks her to stop looking so sad. He pulls away, irritation glinting in his eyes as he continues, saying he doesn't have the patience to console her when she cries. She simply nods in acknowledgement, and together they walk forward, her smiling for the crowd, him wearing the same dry, unreadable expression, until a quiet scoff escaped him. A faint flush creeps onto his cheeks as he mutters under his breath, "Damn Ambrose." That night in the Duke's manor, she sits in quiet reflection, realizing she had never known weddings could be so exhausting. The door bursts open, and though she longed to collapse straight into bed, she knew she couldn't, not when it was still, after all, their wedding night. The Duke walks into the room, and she springs up immediately. However, he approaches with his usual dryness, saying there's no need for that and asking her to just sit down and make herself comfortable. His words push her into thought, a bead of sweat forming on her face as she wonders silently how she is supposed to be comfortable. She recalls how, almost immediately after the wedding ceremony ended, the Duke's aide came to her with a document. He explained that the maximum period is 3 years and informed her of her role, to be a quiet and ladylike Duchess Rochester. He added that the document also covered guaranteed provisions after the divorce, asking her to look through them. She glances at the document, the first thing catching her eyes being, divorce after 3 years, no affairs allowed over the duration of the marriage. During the marriage, she will be supplied with 200 gold coins for dignity maintenance, and after the divorce, she will receive land in a manor in the Melwyn region, along with a monthly allowance of 100 gold coins. After reading the document, she glances up at him, forcing a smile as she asks if she has to sign it at that moment. In the present, she tells the Duke she has something she must say. Once she catches his attention, she tells him she got the contract earlier. Before she can finish, the Duke cuts in, closing the distance between them an instant as he demands to know what her goal is. Leaning forward with his hand resting on the table behind her, he asks what she wants from him so badly that she's trying to seduce him with that dewy-eyed face. Stepping closer, he asks if perhaps she got her hopes up because it was their wedding night. Leaning completely against the table, she tells him no, adding that she would never. She ends up lying back on the table, the Duke continuing to close in until he gently grabs her jaw, calling her, "my dear." With a hand on her knee, he reveals he heard she was desperately looking for him. Breaking her silence, she tells him she just thought of something they should add to the contract. She points out that the contract currently says nothing about an heir, while the Duke's hand slips forward, pushing her dress along with it. The Duke, not even letting her finish, suddenly exclaims, "Fine." He agrees to add a clause to the contract, but first, he suggests they find out if they can even conceive a child together. His words startle her, and she shouts, "What?" With a teasing expression, the Duke asks if that wasn't the kind of wedding night she expected. She raises her hand to her chest, her gaze stern, and tells him they haven't even revised the contents of the contract yet. But he only lifts her head, saying that if she was going to use that as an excuse to run away, then she shouldn't have provoked him in the first place. With that, he presses his lips to hers. Their tongues tangle, exchanging deep, sensual sensations, while she thinks about how she can't breathe. She turns her head to gasp for air, but that doesn't stop him. He kisses the corner of her lips before returning to her mouth, and as their tongues intertwine, exploring the depths of each other's mouths, she thinks he's so persistent. She trembles all over, and the Duke finally pulls away, a thin chain of spit still linking them. He enjoys her helpless expression for a moment before extending his hand to help her up. Once she's standing, he remarks dryly, "If she's that scared from just that, then she's clearly not ready for a child." Without warning, he lifts her up, clutching her in his arms, as he asks, "Or is this part of your absurd little act?" Breaking into a sweat from the tension, her heart racing so fast, she asks him to put her down, saying she can walk on her own, but he doesn't seem to pay attention to her. Finally, he drops her onto the bed, saying he'll have his aide revise the contract. Then, turning away, he greets her good night. Once the door shuts behind him, the words suddenly fall out of her mouth, a quiet and ladylike Duchess Rochester. She raises her hand to her mouth, her cheeks heating as shyness washes over her. In a new scene, a man casually swirls the champagne in his glass, the crystal catching the candlelight, before remarking, "I wonder why a groom who should be enjoying his wedding night would secretly sneak into the palace at such a late hour." The Duke steps inside, slipping off his cloak with slow precision, his expression unreadable. He tells him he simply couldn't stand to be in the same house as his devious wife. Dropping onto the couch with a lazy but deliberate motion, he adds with a faint curl of his lip that he should have seen her face, it was like. His mind drifts back, her eyes fixed on him with the expression of a pure virgin, one he never wanted any other man to see. On the outside, he only mutters that anyway, she's a vixen. Across from him, Rodney Red Eric, the Crown Prince, lets his voice ring through the room. Does that mean Stella Ambrose is indeed His Majesty's spy? The Duke recalls their brief but charged moment earlier. He rubs his thumb and index finger together, the same ones that had tilted her chin toward him. Turning to the prince, his tone drops to a frosted calm as he calmly explains that there's no evidence of it yet, but he's sure of it, adding that he sees no reason for her to marry him otherwise. The Crown Prince chimes in asking what he means, then he shares his own understanding of the situation. The Emperor sees him as the highest threat to the throne, and perhaps he simply didn't want his in-laws giving him a solid foundation. The Duke's grip tightens on the arm of the chair, anger rising in his chest as he questions aloud, why Stella Ambrose of all women? The Crown Prince responds again, this time he suggests it might be because she had the least value in the marriage market. His voice hardens now, each word deliberate as he notes, for their plan to work, they need concrete evidence. She must be a spy for them to turn the tables. And if she is trying to seduce him on the Emperor's orders, then he should go along with it, at least to an extent. He continues telling him if he gives her an opening, she will report it to the Emperor, or with a more lighter tone he suggests he could try seducing her first. The Duke repeats the word slowly, seduce her first, his mind lingering on that statement. Then, the corner of his lips curl into a sharp smirk as he agrees, it's not a bad idea. I was starting to get fed up of her pretentious naivety anyways. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you'd like to see part 2.